Salvete Discipuli. We are on to chapter 16 in book 6 of the De Bello Gallico. You have your do now here to start with. If you'd like to pause here and do some practice on these questions, you can do so. Just some reminders of where we last left off. We have finished talking about sort of the basic duties of the Druids and a very brief discussion of the equestrian class in Gaul. It's slightly different from how Roman society is broken down, but definitely relevant here to think about. So make sure you have a good understanding of that. If you don't, the AP College Board video that just came out on Wednesday the 25th does a really nice explanation of the social classes in ancient Rome versus ancient Gaul, and I recommend taking a look at that. You don't have to watch the whole video to get that information. You can skip ahead if you need to, but those are linked on Google Classroom, and you can check out their videos. They're actually quite good. We are going to get into, in a little bit more depth today, the Gallic religious practices, and today we're going to talk about the very controversial, very interesting human sacrifice that Caesar alleges the Gauls conducted. But before we get into that, let's answer our do now questions. So number one, which individuals does Caesar say are more likely to practice human sacrifice? According to lines 1 and 3, he says the people who are affected by illnesses or people who are going into battle or some kind of mortal danger, right? People who are likely to die based on various things. Number 2, what grammatical construction is se immolaturos in line 3? That is an indirect statement. Remember that often we leave out the esse with these future active participles in the infinitive. So it really is a future active infinitive, but we like to leave out esse. Caesar does that a lot. That's something that we are used to at this point. Number 3, what grammatical construction is non to placare? We have, yet again, an indirect statement with that present passive infinitive there. Number 4, what is the method of execution described in lines 5 through 7? This is the wicker man. We are told that the Gauls would build large statues in the shape of human beings, so having a torso and limbs and a head. They would cover this statue, they use the word simulacrum here, with wicker, which is that sort of flexible woody plant. When you dry it out, it is something you can make baskets out of and other things. People make furniture out of it even. So it's sturdy enough. And they would put people inside the hollow spaces made up by the limbs and then set it on fire so that when the people were surrounded by the flames, they would perish. Number 5, the tense, voice, and mood of contexta. That is a perfect passive participle. Number 6, the subject of ex animator is homines. Number 7, according to lines 7 through 8, what individuals are the ones typically sacrificed and why? We're told that those who are typically put in the wicker man are those who have committed some kind of crime. And it says that the Gauls believe this is more pleasing to their gods, the punishment of those who are criminals. But we find out that sometimes they will descend to sacrificing innocents if they do not have enough criminals, but they need to perform a human sacrifice for some reason. So in number 8, what case is innocentium? That is genitive. This is a third declension I stem noun. All right, so those are our do now questions. Make sure you keep practicing with these kinds of questions. We'll be doing more practice later on once we finish off the syllabus readings, but we will need to be able to master these if we want to be successful on the AP exam. All right, so let's dig in and read about what Caesar has to say about the Gauls committing human sacrifice. And just a reminder, this is only attested in non-Gallic sources. There's no archaeological evidence to support that the Gauls committed human sacrifice. There is only claims in Caesar and a few other ancient Greco-Roman sources that claim the Gauls committed human sacrifice. And these are being reported by enemies of the Gauls. So we have to think about how true those claims might be based on the fact that they are being reported by Gallic enemies. Okay? But let's dig in. So we start with natio est omnis Gallorum ad modum dedita religionibus. Natio here is our subject, and the verb is est dedita. We are not surprised. Caesar does this all the time, where he basically separates the two portions of a perfect passive verb like this. So not too alarming. Omnis goes with natio, so that's the entire nation. And be careful with translating Gallorum. I see this mistake all the time, where you see Gall and you think it's Gaul or the Gauls, when it's the opposite. So this is the orum ending tells me I'm talking about the Gauls as a people. So this is the entire nation of Gauls, or of the Gauls, not of Gaul, the place. So please be careful. This is a very easy way to lose a point on a translation portion of an AP exam. Anyway, we have the entire nation of the Gauls was dedicated to religionibus. We get the word religion from here, but here in the plural, right, we're really talking about religious practices or religious ceremonies. Ad modum here means in this way. So the entire nation of the Gauls was dedicated to religious ceremonies in this way. Then we continue, atque ab eam causam, and on that account, and we're going to use this relative clause here as a subject for immolant and vovent later. So this whole relative clause going from qui to resantur, that serves as the subject of those two verbs. Okay, we can understand maybe an e there if that helps. But those who were affected by gravioribus morbis, there's our ablative of means by, and this is comparative adjective, but we are not really comparing it with anything, so we just want to translate it as rather serious illnesses. So those who were affected by rather serious illnesses and who are engaged in, this is a deponent verb, in battles and dangers, right, or dangerous situations. So again, these are people who are likely to die. Either, we have it out, so either or, either they sacrifice human beings in the place of, so pro here can translate as for or in the place of, right? We have heard the phrase a lot this year, quid pro quo, something for something, and that's how we use pro here. So they sacrifice human beings, is accusative here, in the place of animal victims. So victimis here is usually always animals. So animal victims, cows, sheep, pigs, animals like that, bulls, that sort of thing. So they either sacrifice humans in the place of animal victims, or they vow that they will sacrifice, and understood, humans in the place of animal victims. Okay, so people who are going to die either commit human sacrifice or promise to do it. And they utuntor, this is from utor, uti, ususum, to use. It takes the ablative as direct object. It's one of those deponent verbs that does that. They use the Druids as the administrators, the practitioners for these sacrifices. So the Druids are going to be the ones who commit these sacrifices. So say you are sick and you are worried you're about to die, or say you're about to go into battle, you go visit your local Druid and say, hey, I would like to make a human sacrifice. Let's use this guy here. We're going to go more into which victims they pick in just a second, but we know that's going to be criminals for the most part. Okay, and they're going to explain now why they think human sacrifice works with this causal clause introduced by Quode. Because, and then we're actually going to start with Nisi, unless the life of a human is given in return for the life of a human. So unless a life is given for a life, Non arbitrantur, they do not think that the numen, so we're in an indirect statement here, remember, numen is going to be the subject of that. That's neuter, so its accusative form is the same as its nominative form. That the divinity of the deathless gods, of the immortal gods, cannot be placated. So they think that unless you sacrifice a human being for another human being, that you cannot make the gods happy, right? And they won't grant what you're asking for in the sacrifice, which is to save your own life. So again, because unless the life of a person is returned for the life of a person, they think that the divinity of the immortal gods cannot be placated. Okay. And finishing off the sentence here, and sacrifices of this same type, they have sacrifices of this same type instituted publicly, right? So they do this on a public state scale. So you can imagine that if a tribe is about to go to war, they might stage a massive human sacrifice before they go to war to stave off any sort of death on the part of their army. That seems to be what Caesar is implying here. Okay. Here we have a depiction of this wicker man that we're about to talk about. You can see the sort of the skeletal outlines of it that then is going to get covered with this wicker material. You can see them loading people inside it. You can see the limbs sticking out. This is supposed to be horrifying. So if you're horrified, it's working. You can make out here these sort of cloaked figures are likely to be the druids who are conducting this sacrifice. And here is actually a still from the modern Wicker Man movie. So you can imagine what it looks like when those things are on fire. Incidentally, in the subsequent horror movies about the Wicker Man, it is suggested that the Wicker Man is done not as saving a life for a life, but for fertility, a harvest festival that you sacrifice human life in return for the sort of promise of a good harvest that year. Also, by the way, if any of you guys are watching The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix, which is quite good, you'll see in the most recent season there are these sort of pagan witches that present themselves as enemies, and you see a lot of similar druidic practices going on there. And they have a variation on the Wicker Man. They don't set it on fire, but they call it the Green Man. And it's a very similar practice. So you might see some of those kinds of things. It's continued to inspire horror movies, these stories of these human sacrifices. So it is a very effective form of propaganda against your enemy to suggest that they do this. There's probably some sort of truth about building these statues, but we don't know just because, like, who would come up with this then? But it's highly unlikely based on the archaeological evidence that we have that they were used for human sacrifice to the degree that the Romans say. And if you think about it, if you remember back when you read about Pliny's letter about the Christians, where he talks about those things. Why were the Christians considered so unusual to the Roman audience, to a polytheistic audience? Partly because of the monotheism, they have this strange, unusual God. But if you think about early Christian practices, for instance, the Eucharist and the body and the blood of the Christ, if you don't understand what that is, that it's just symbolism, it's not actually eating flesh and blood, you're then going to make accusations about these people being cannibals. And this is exactly what happened to early Christians. They were accused of being cannibals because people didn't understand their religious practices. So we can see from that how something that might have been more innocuous becomes fuel for propaganda against a religious group. Anyway, let's dig into the Wicker Man, shall we? We start with Ali'i as our subject, and that's just some people. So some of them. So we know that they do human sacrifice. So this doesn't mean that the Wicker Man is something they do for every human sacrifice. So this sounds more like it's one of those sort of large-scale sacrifices if they're going to eliminate multiple people in one go. So some of them have figures. So we actually have an English word simulacrum, and what it means is the likeness, right? We see the word simul in there, right? Which means it's related to similus. So it looks like a person. A simulacrum is something that looks like another person. So here we can translate it as figures or likenesses. So some have figures, and then we have an ablative description here of great size, of great magnitude. And we have quorum, contexta, viminibus, membra vivis hominibus complent. Membra here is the thing that we probably want to translate first. It is the accusative direct object of complent, and we're going to take it with quorum. Quorum is referring back to the simulacra. So we say, the limbs of which, having been covered or woven with wicker, they fill, right? So the Gauls fill. And then we have the ablative of means that go with complent with living men. So the limbs of which, covered with wicker, they fill with living men. And then we have another relative clause here, quibus, again, still referring back to the simulacra, and it's in an ablative absolute here. We probably don't want to translate it which, or you could even say in after which figures having been lit on fire. So or after these figures were lit on fire, you could even say. Homines is our new subject of ex animantur. Men. And then we have the perfect passive participle circumventi, modifying homines, surrounded by flame, perish, ex animator, literally to go out of life. They die. Okay, so this we have the description of the Wicker Man. You light them on fire, and this is how you eliminate a lot of human sacrifices in one go. All right. Let's find out about who they sacrifice. This is the last bit. This is the last bit that's supposed to really horrify us. So we want to go down to arbitrantur as our main verb because the rest of this is an indirect statement. So again, the Gauls are our understood subject. They think that. And so supplicia to esse, that's all indirect statements. We have a relative clause embedded in there from qui to naxia sint. You'll notice sint is in the subjunctive. Now, it could be a relative clause of characteristic, but you also have to remember that any subordinate clause within an indirect statement is automatically going to go into the subjunctive, so it could just be a normal relative clause. We don't know for sure. So it may not be as exciting as one might think. Anyway, so they think that the punishments of those who, there's our antecedent, eorum is our antecedent of qui, who comprehensi sint, are caught in crime, right, or theft, actually we should say for Furto, in theft or in highway robbery or some other crime. So they think that the punishments of those who, we got a little tricolon here, are caught or have been caught in theft or highway robbery or some crime, are gratior, more pleasing to the immortal gods. So let's talk about the difference between furto and latrocinio because it seems like theft and robbery are pretty much the same thing. Furto is general theft, breaking in, entering into somebody's home, stealing their stuff. Latrocinio is always stealing from somebody who's in the process of traveling. Kind of interesting that we have a different word for that, but this is the word that we use for people who will waylay you on the roads. So latrocinium is something that happens while people are traveling on the highway. If your carriage gets, attacked by robbers, this is that particular crime. This This word also is used to describe piracy at sea as well. So that's latrocinium. It's different from regular theft, somebody breaking and entering your home, which we would use furtum to describe. Okay. And then just blanket term for any other crime, noxia. We get the English word noxious from this. So it's a good way to remember that noxia means something bad. Okay. Last bit of the sentence, but. And then we have a cum temporal clause here. We know it's temporal because defecit is indicative. But when the supply of this type is lacking, defecit, they even descend to the punishments of innocent people. So if we're out of criminals, but we still have to do a human sacrifice, they will sacrifice innocent people. This is supposed to be horrifying. Caesar's not going to give us any details about how they decide or why they've decided this. He just wants us to be horrified. And I suspect that you guys are, in fact, horrified. Right? So that's our translation on human sacrifice for the day. I'm going to let you guys digest that, think about that, and get ready to answer your questions about this. Your assignments tonight, you have a Google form on chapter 16. Translate 17 and 18 for tomorrow. We are almost there. 4 chapters left to read, and then you are done translating for AP Latin. Very exciting. I also want to remind you guys that this is apparently every weeknight that the College Board is doing a live stream on AP Latin. They are doing book 6 of the De Bella Gallico right now. These live streams start at 6 p.m. and they go until 6:45. They are posted up later, so if you can't watch them live, you can watch them later, although they did a Kahoot in their first one, so I don't know if they're going to do that regularly, but there might be some benefit to watching them live. The link to watch these are on Google Classroom. I'll make sure it's posted right up at the top. They're going to do book 6, and then they said they're going to do some other review stuff to help us get ready for the AP exam. So once we finish watching my videos and getting through this, we may be watching some. I may be requiring that you guys watch some of these, but I'll always do something that you can watch later. You don't have to watch live. In addition to doing some more practice together, practice essays, practice FRQs, practice multiple choice. Okay, guys? So stay safe, be well. Get your assignments done, and as always, do not hesitate to reach out to me with questions. I'm very quick on the turnaround as long as you email me before it's too late at night. And I'm happy to set up any live sessions. We will probably do some live sessions when it gets closer to review time, okay? But hang in there, and I will talk to you all next time. Have a great night.